In the dark and uncertain age after the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe lay in fragments. From the ashes of this broken continent, the Kingdom of France began to emerge. Amidst tribal wars, religious uncertainty, and shifting loyalties, a new order was being forged. One man would come to embody the very spirit of this new world: Roland, a warrior of noble blood and unmatched bravery. His name would echo for centuries as the perfect image of chivalry and sacrifice. Born into the aristocracy of the Frankish world, Roland was said to be a nephew of the great Emperor Charlemagne. Whether this is myth or truth is lost to time. But what is certain is that he served Charlemagne as the prefect of the Breton March, a critical military frontier. He trained among hardened warriors, learned the ways of war, and prepared for the coming battles that would test every ounce of his loyalty. It was in the year 778 that Roland's name would be immortalized. Charlemagne led his army into northern Spain to suppress a rebellion and confront the Muslim rulers of Zaragoza. The campaign was not what Charlemagne expected. While he succeeded in negotiating terms, betrayal and unrest simmered beneath the surface. As the Frankish army began its long march back home, the emperor assigned Roland to command the rear guard. Their path would take them through the narrow, treacherous Roncevaux Pass in the Pyrenees. What happened next would be etched into legend. As the Frankish army threaded through the mountain pass, they were ambushed. Basque warriors, hidden in the cliffs, descended upon Roland's unit. They fought like men possessed. Roland, though surrounded and outnumbered, refused to call for help. He feared dishonor more than death. The battle raged under the mountain skies. Arrows darkened the air. Sword met shield. Blood soaked the stones. Roland fought with the fury of 100 men. At last, when most of his men had fallen, he sounded his great war horn, Oliphant. The sound echoed across the mountains, so forceful that it burst the very blood vessels in his head. His temple cracked. He collapsed, bleeding, dying. But his sacrifice was not in vain. Charlemagne heard the horn and returned, only to find the rear guard slaughtered. Roland lay among them, still clutching his shattered horn and sword. It was a tragedy, but also a symbol. The story of Roland would become the foundation of France's chivalric identity. His deeds were passed down through generations. The Chanson de Roland, an epic poem composed 2 centuries later, turned his tale into sacred legend. He was no longer a soldier. He was a martyr, a hero of Christendom. But the medieval world was not one of saints alone. As time passed, the same land that birthed Roland's legend would also give rise to men of unspeakable darkness. Among them was Gilles de Rais. Once hailed as a hero of France and comrade of Joan of Arc, Gilles de Rais would become infamous for crimes so gruesome they shattered the moral foundations of his time. From the height of knightly honor to the depths of monstrous cruelty, France bore witness to both ends of the human soul. Gilles de Rais was born into wealth, power, and nobility. Trained in warfare, he distinguished himself in battle at a young age. He stood alongside Joan of Arc during her campaign to lift the siege of Orléans. His bravery and leadership were celebrated throughout the realm. Yet behind the armor and banners lay a troubled spirit. After Joan's death, Gilles withdrew from public life. He spent lavishly, obsessed over alchemy and the occult, and descended into madness. Rumors began to spread of children disappearing near his castles, of strange rituals, of screams in the night. By the time the king intervened, it was too late. Gilles de Rais had turned his estates into chambers of death. He confessed to the murder of over 100 children, though some accounts suggest the true number was far higher. His trial in 1440 shocked the kingdom. In chains, the once great knight stood before the church and confessed to unspeakable acts. He was condemned and hanged before being burned. The people who once cheered his victories now turned away in horror. Thus, the land of Roland also birthed Gilles de Rais. 2 men, 2 paths, 1 kingdom. The Middle Ages were a time of contradictions, glory and horror, faith and terror. The same soil that gave rise to legends also bore monsters. In the annals of history, both Roland and Gilles stand immortal. One for valor, the other for villainy. Their stories remind us that the past is never just light or dark, but a spectrum of human nature stretched across time. From sacred duty to savage cruelty, France of the Middle Ages held them all. It was a land of heroes, a land of horrors, and above all, a land where the line between the two could vanish in a moment of silence or a scream in the night. The Middle Ages continued to evolve as France passed from the Carolingian to the Capetian dynasty. In this time, the ideals of chivalry were further refined. Kings and knights alike were expected to uphold not just military power, but also justice, loyalty, and Christian values. Among the greatest examples of this transformation was King Louis IX, remembered today as St. Louis. He ruled from 1226 to 1270 and was known not just for his piety, but for his legal reforms and efforts to bring fairness to the people of France. He banned trial by combat and insisted on courts based on written evidence. Under his reign, France saw a flowering of religious architecture, such as the stunning Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, built to house holy relics. St. Louis also led 2 crusades, though both ended in failure and personal tragedy. Despite these setbacks, he remained a symbol of just and moral leadership. Meanwhile, the legend of Joan of Arc began to take root. Born in 1412 to a peasant family, she claimed to receive divine visions urging her to support Charles VII and reclaim France from English control during the 100 Years' War. At just 17, she led troops into battle and broke the siege of Orléans. Her success led to the coronation of Charles VII at Reims, a crucial morale victory for the French. Yet her fate was tragic. Captured by Burgundian allies of the English, she was put on trial for heresy and witchcraft. The trial was deeply political, and despite her steadfastness, she was burned at the stake in 1431. Years later, the Church reversed her conviction and declared her a martyr. Joan of Arc became a national symbol of resistance, faith, and courage against impossible odds. But while some stood for justice, others distorted the law for cruelty. The medieval justice system, for much of the era, was arbitrary and brutal. Common crimes included theft, arson, blasphemy, and treason. The punishments were often public and gruesome: whippings, amputations, branding, hanging, and even burning. Trial by ordeal was common. The accused might have to hold a red-hot iron or retrieve an object from boiling water. If their wounds healed cleanly, they were judged innocent. Trial by combat allowed 2 individuals to fight until one yielded or died. The victor was believed to be proven right by God. Over time, rulers like St. Louis began to replace these brutal methods with more structured court systems. But torture and execution remained common, especially in cases of treason or heresy. The Church also played a major role in justice. The Inquisition, established in the 13th century, was designed to combat heresy. It spread across Europe, using torture to extract confessions and punishing heretics with prison, public penance, or execution. In southern France, the Albigensian Crusade was launched to eliminate the Cathar heresy. Entire towns were slaughtered. The line between faith and cruelty became increasingly blurred. Justice, in the hands of zealots or fearful rulers, became a weapon. The lives of peasants and nobles alike could be upended by rumor, accusation, or the shifting moods of power. France of the Middle Ages was a land defined by both its heroes and its horrors. Roland's sacrifice, St. Louis's fairness, and Joan's visions represented the high ideals of the era. But the same soil birthed the madness of Gilles de Rais and the fires of the Inquisition. The line between righteousness and monstrosity was thin, often drawn in blood. These stories remind us that the past is a mirror. It reflects both our noblest aspirations and our darkest fears. From the heroism of a knight at Roncevaux Pass to the atrocities committed in the name of God or country, the Middle Ages were never simple. They were real, raw, and human. And that is why they continue to haunt us, centuries later. And in the quiet corners of French memory, both Roland and Gilles de Rais remain. Statues honor one. Records condemn the other. Their lives played out on the same soil, under the same skies, but left behind very different legacies. One life inspired epics and oaths of knighthood. The other became the cautionary tale of what happens when power turns inward, when evil is cloaked in nobility. Roland stood with honor until his final breath. Gilles surrendered to darkness long before his death. Between them lies the story of medieval France, of all its glory, its faith, its triumphs, and its deepest terrors. We study these figures not only to remember them but to remind ourselves that greatness and horror are often separated by the slimmest of margins. In that narrow space, kingdoms rise and fall, heroes ascend, and monsters are born. From the high castles to the gallows, from sacred hymns to tortured screams, this was France in the Middle Ages, a world both blessed and cursed by the people who walked its blood-stained path. And in the quiet corners of French memory, both Roland and Gilles de Rais remain. Statues honor one. Records condemn the other. Their lives played out on the same soil, under the same skies, but left behind very different legacies. One life inspired epics and oaths of knighthood. The other became the cautionary tale of what happens when power turns inward, when evil is cloaked in nobility. Roland stood with honor until his final breath. Gilles surrendered to darkness long before his death. Between them lies the story of medieval France, of all its glory, its faith, its triumphs, and its deepest terrors. We study these figures not only to remember them but to remind ourselves that greatness and horror are often separated by the slimmest of margins. In that narrow space, kingdoms rise and fall, heroes ascend, and monsters are born. From the high castles to the gallows, from sacred hymns to tortured screams, this was France in the Middle Ages, a world both blessed and cursed by the people who walked its blood-stained path. You've just witnessed one of the darkest punishments in history. But many more still lurk in the shadows. So if you dare, subscribe to Torture Vault, where every scream from the past still echoes.